A cat requests assistance from the police, and when they accompany him, they find something that frightens them. It was a chilly autumn morning, and the streets were nearly empty, shrouded in a thin fog that ascended from the moist pavements of the prior night's calm. All was tranquil as usual, and the city appeared to follow its regular schedule, with hardly anything unusual ever occurring. Henry and Madison, two seasoned police officers, began another workday. The local police station, located in a central area near the main square, was a spot where few noteworthy events occurred. Minor disputes among neighbors, occasional quarrels, and sometimes a traffic incident were the majority of events witnessed there. Life appeared to adhere to a gradual and expected pace, and they had both grown used to this seeming repetitiveness. As Henry sipped his coffee outside the police station, he gazed at the street with a vacant expression until something drew his eye. It was the feline, not merely any feline, but the very one that frequently showed up there. His distinctive gray fur and soulful, expressive eyes were undeniable. He wasn't precisely a pet, nor did he appear to have an owner, but his regular presence around the police station made him nearly a recognizable figure. The cat exhibited strange behavior. He seemed to materialize and vanish like a specter, moving silently, always on the periphery of events, as though he understood more than he revealed. However, that morning, something felt unusual. Henry observed that the cat wasn't just meandering as she normally did. Her actions seemed purposeful, which fascinated him greatly. "Madison, take another look at the cat," he remarked, furrowing his brow and gesturing towards the gradually advancing creature. Madison, preoccupied with moving some papers in the car, took some time to see what Henry was attempting to display. Madison scarcely glanced up and answered absently, "She's probably searching for food, as usual." For her, the cat's actions were typical, but Henry sensed that something had changed. The cat didn't merely walk by. He paused midway, turned to the two police officers, and emitted a sharp, high-pitched meow. It wasn't merely a sound. It was a meow infused with urgency that resonated through the alley adjacent to the police station, seeming almost like a plea for assistance. Curious, Henry knelt down, reaching out his hand to the cat, attempting to discern its needs. However, against what was anticipated, the creature did not come closer. Rather, it leaped away, maintaining its gaze on Henry and Madison, and emitted another, even more urgent meow. It seemed like he was attempting to establish a connection, as though he urgently needed to express something. Henry gazed at Madison intently and remarked, "That cat is behaving unusually. Notice this. He's attempting to demonstrate something." His more earnest tone piqued Madison's interest, causing her to finally divert her gaze from the paper she was sorting. As she gazed at the cat, a surge of curiosity washed over her. The cat's gaze appeared locked onto theirs, fierce and nearly mesmerizing. Madison paused briefly, yet the animal's actions gave her the impression that there was something deeper happening. The cat subsequently stepped back a bit, halting in the center of the road. He glanced at the two once more, as though he were summoning them, as if he intended to guide them to a certain place. "Perhaps it's merely a coincidence," Madison whispered, still attempting to disregard the oddness of the scenario. Nonetheless, a discomforting sensation started to grow inside her, as if something more significant was on the verge of coming to light. Abruptly, the cat spun around and started to hurry down the street, pausing occasionally to glance back and see if the two officers were trailing him. Henry acted without hesitation. He stood up swiftly and, without waiting for Madison, declared, "Let's pursue him." Madison glanced at the documents on the car seat, contemplating whether she should truly spend time on this. Henry's resolute demeanor indicated that he had made up his mind, and a feeling within Madison, maybe a police instinct or something more profound, urged her to accompany him. "Okay, but if this ends up being pointless, you owe me a coffee," she remarked, attempting to ease the tension beginning to settle around them with a playful tone. The two started to trail the cat as it moved through the empty streets with captivating assurance. That morning, the city felt remarkably quiet. The only sounds were the footsteps of Henry and Madison, and the cat's sporadic meows punctuating the stillness. While they strolled, the atmosphere started to shift in an almost subtle but unmistakably disquieting manner. The ominous clouds that were once distant on the horizon now appeared to converge above them, saturating the atmosphere with a sense of weight and unease. The cat led them expertly, navigating tight alleys and traversing nearly hidden routes, areas that would be overlooked by many. The street lamplights twinkled, intensifying the unease and the sense that something was amiss. "I don't like that smell," Madison whispered, glancing around with a blend of worry and distrust. Henry, on the other hand, appeared solely fixated on the creature, as if he realized it was directing him towards something significant. As they progressed, they started to notice that they were departing from the most crowded sections of the city. The landscape now consisted of lonely old roads, where deserted warehouses stood quietly, neglected spots that nobody had any reason to go to. The cat halted before one of the oldest storage buildings in the area. It was a structure neglected by time, with heavy, corroded chains and a lock that appeared to have remained closed for years. Surrounding the area, the high grass and shattered windows emphasized the desolation of the site. Nonetheless, the cat appeared unfazed by this. He positioned himself by the door, emitting a much louder and more troubling meow, as if he were pleading for attention. "Why did he take us here?" Madison questioned, sensing her heart pounding in her chest. Henry, wearing a serious expression, advanced a step closer to the door. Something was certainly amiss. The stillness enveloping them felt nearly oppressive, as if time had frozen. Even the wind, which had once appeared to blow consistently, was now calm. The cat stayed motionless, gazing at the door, as if he wouldn't budge until they took action. "I believe we should enter," Henry said, attempting to conceal the anxiety that was starting to surface. Madison glanced around, sensing the heaviness of the surroundings. It felt like the air was electrified, as if an unseen presence was observing them. As she neared the door, she saw something that sent shivers down her spine. Even though the padlock showed signs of rust, the chain was slack, suggesting it had been tampered with not long ago. "It didn't used to be this way," she remarked, giving Henry a worried glance. He nodded and carefully moved ahead. Madison raised the chain and gradually opened the door. The creak reverberated in the quiet like a shout, as though that door had remained shut for ages. When the passage became visible, a potent and disagreeable odor wafted through the air, causing the two to pause briefly. Madison raised her hand to her face, attempting to shield herself from the smell, and dismiss the increasing discomfort that felt like a knot in her stomach. Before they had a chance to respond, the cat stepped in ahead of them, moving with purpose, almost as if he had a precise destination in mind. Henry and Madison shared a quick glance, and then, silently, chose to trail behind the creature. The enigma appeared to deepen as Henry and Madison trailed the cat, casting light into the shadowy interior with their flashlights. The atmosphere was thick, and the location looked dreary, with aged boxes and fragments of furniture strewn on the ground, enveloped in dust and cobwebs. The sense that something was deeply unsettling intensified with each step they made. At that point, the quiet was interrupted. An unusual noise reverberated from the rear of the warehouse. Something was shifting there. Henry glanced at Madison, his heart pounding. Whatever it may be, we're about to discover it. The atmosphere was charged with tension. If you enjoy thrilling tales like this, hit like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement is vital for us to keep delivering more captivating stories. If you possess an experience to share, please go ahead. It may inspire numerous individuals who, similar to you, have a passion for animals. The sound at the rear of the warehouse kept echoing against the old, corroded walls. Madison instinctively turned to Henry. They both sensed the gravity of the moment, as if something was on the verge of occurring. The flashlights trembled a bit in their grips, mirroring the blend of excitement and anticipation that surged inside them. In the meantime, the cat advanced, proceeding with the same resolve that had led him to this point. "What do you believe this is?" Madison murmured, attempting to steady her breath, which was starting to quicken. Her senses were heightened, as if each noise or motion might reveal answers or pose a threat. "I'm unsure, but we should remain vigilant," said Henry, maintaining his gaze on the shadowy recesses of the warehouse from where the noise originated. The cat suddenly halted, swiveling to confront the two police officers, seemingly verifying that they would keep following him until the end. The atmosphere was charged, and the look in the cat's eyes indicated that what lay ahead would certainly be far from usual. The cat emitted another meow, drawn out and filled with stress, before heading towards a shadowy corner of the warehouse. Silence once more enveloped the surroundings, interrupted solely by the echoes of Henry and Madison's footsteps reverberating in the vacant area. As they neared, they recognized with each step that this location was even more bizarre than they'd envisioned. There were obvious indications that someone or something had recently visited: damaged boxes, stains on the floor, and a sickening odor in the air, something decayed and foul that instinctively caused them to hold their breath. Madison aimed the light of her flashlight at a box in the corner. It was slightly open, with a damaged lid, as though it had been flipped over in a rush. She paused briefly, sensing a shiver travel up her spine, yet her curiosity prevailed. With a trembling hand, she fully opened the box. What she discovered took her breath away. It was not what she had anticipated. Inside were garments, but they weren't worn or ripped. Children's clothes, tiny coats, shoes, and various items lay scattered haphazardly, as if abandoned in a rush. "What is this?" Madison murmured, clutching one of the garments in her hands, her voice trembling with shock. Henry moved closer, narrowing his eyes, attempting to understand what he was looking at. The cat stayed still, his body tense, his gaze locked on an unseen object, as if he sensed that the worst had yet to arrive. Abruptly, the stillness was interrupted once more. The noise had increased, approaching, emanating from somewhere beyond. Henry rapidly directed his flashlight to a corner of the warehouse, where a metal door stood slightly ajar, exposing a vast, shadowy area beyond. The two officers exchanged glances, tension mounting as they recognized they were only at the start of a mystery that hinted at being far more extensive and sinister than they had anticipated. "Oh my God," Madison whispered, unable to turn her gaze elsewhere. The body left there for days, maybe weeks, appeared to hold a deeper mystery than the already bleak situation suggested. Something felt off. The man didn't seem homeless, nor like someone who had been taken off guard. He had on nice clothes, and in one hand, he held something that instantly drew her attention, a chain featuring a golden pendant. Henry moved closer, inspecting more carefully. Gently, he tugged the chain and kept the pendant illuminated by the flashlight's beam. It was a little cross, uncomplicated, yet rich in significance. There was something about that item that indicated it held significance for the man. Who might he be, and what could he be doing in this place? Henry murmured, addressing himself rather than seeking a reply. Madison, remaining in disbelief, attempted to comprehend what lay in front of her. The cat, now perched beside the corpse, appeared to watch everything as if he were the protector of that grim tableau. His quiet, enigmatic presence merely enhanced the oddity of the situation. Madison interrupted the quiet, her voice trembling. "No matter what it is, It's not typical. This location is... She halted suddenly as a different noise resonated in the atmosphere. Quick, heavy footsteps were nearing the warehouse from outside. "We have to leave this place," Henry urged, pulling on Madison's arm with urgency. Both switched off their flashlights and began heading toward the exit, attempting to remain silent. The tension was noticeable. Every action carefully managed to prevent drawing attention. However, the cat, still beside the body, did not accompany them. He stayed there, as though he understood his task was still incomplete. Prior to stepping through the doorway, Henry glanced back at the cat, its outline casting shadows in the dimness of the warehouse. An aspect of the creature's conduct appeared to express a disturbing assurance. The sounds of footsteps drew nearer. Henry and Madison crouched behind a box, holding their breath as they attempted to see who or what was approaching. The noise reverberated against the warehouse walls, increasing in volume, until at last, a silhouette emerged at the doorway. He was a towering figure clad in dark attire. He was grasping something in his hands, but the faint light rendered it impossible to discern what it was. Madison sensed her heart pounding and instinctively clutched Henry's arm. "We have to leave this place immediately," she murmured, her tone laced with urgency. Henry acknowledged with a nod, and the two started to proceed quietly, aiming to avoid any sounds. However, when they were only a few steps from the warehouse's side door, a noise caused them to stop abruptly. The cat released a sharp meow that reverberated across the area like an unavoidable alarm. The man swiftly turned in the direction of the noise, his eyes scanning the warehouse until they landed on the cat, which stood beside the body. He paused briefly, obviously perplexed, but then he dug into his coat and retrieved something. Henry and Madison found themselves with no options left. It was now or never. They dashed out the door, the sound of the man's footsteps behind them growing nearer as they escaped. The cat remained in its spot beside the body, its eyes shining in the darkness, as if anticipating the next scene of an unfinished drama. The pursuit initiated with a rush. The night was thick and icy. The wind sliced into Henry and Madison's faces as they dashed through the warehouse courtyard. The trees around them created shadows that partially hid them, yet the footsteps of the man behind became louder and nearer. Madison sensed her heart pounding so fiercely that she feared it might burst. Each breath required effort to keep up with the frantic speed of her escape. The enigma that had started silently within the warehouse had escalated into a frantic struggle for survival, with the peril appearing to be just starting. Madison was aware that Henry felt just as frightened as she did, but there was no moment for doubt. "Keep going," yelled Henry, holding her arm to ensure she kept moving. The two sprinted beside the warehouse, evading the unstable glow from the streetlights positioned throughout the deserted area. The warehouse was merely one of numerous industrial structures lost to time, and the stillness surrounding them was interrupted only by their frantic flight and the footsteps of the armed man, trailing closely behind. They realized they were pressed for time. The man had witnessed something he wished to keep secret, and now Henry and Madison found themselves entangled in a situation far more complex than a mere investigation. Henry yanked Madison behind a stack of weathered, rusty boxes, putting his finger on her lips to quiet even her heavy breathing. The enigmatic figure stepped into the courtyard, his pace decreasing, each action more cautious, as if he were thoroughly examining every nook, every noise. He strolled with his firearm ready for anything. Madison sensed perspiration trickling down her temples, mingling with the sharp chill of the evening. Her hands trembled, and fear started to immobilize her, transforming her into a figure. His gaze shifted to Henry, who stayed attentive, attempting to figure out his next move while looking for any chance to break free. Suddenly, something drew the man's focus. A noise from within the warehouse reverberated throughout the courtyard. Madison grasped Henry's arm and whispered in astonishment, "The cat!" The cat's loud, shrill meow echoed through the walls, slicing through the quiet like a knife, and momentarily distracting the pursuer's attention. The man faced the warehouse entrance, pausing, his eyes darting between the shadowy inside and the surrounding area. Henry and Madison, concealed, held their breath, sensing brief relief, but aware that the chase was still far from finished. "If he keeps looking outside, he's providing us an opportunity," Henry whispered, his gaze locked on the man who glanced back one final time before vanishing into the shadowy warehouse. Madison and Henry observed quietly as he departed, with each moment seeming to stretch endlessly. As they finally lost track of him, Madison murmured, her voice filled with urgency, "We have to leave this place and request backup. This individual is engaged in something quite serious." "I concur," responded Henry, already rising but still keeping his gaze fixed on the entrance. "However, we must first uncover what it is. We can't depart without solid proof." Madison paused, sensing the struggle between caution and the urgency to take action. She realized Henry was correct. Fleeing at this moment without grasping the true situation might mean losing the opportunity to uncover something far more significant. The cat had guided them to this location for a purpose, and leaving everything behind in that instant seemed incorrect. There were additional revelations to uncover, aspects that remained beyond their comprehension. Nevertheless, they had to act swiftly. There was no opportunity for indecision. The pair started to advance quietly, seeking a hidden entry to the warehouse that was out of the man's sight. Their hearts were still pounding from the pursuit, but now another emotion was surfacing: resolve. After several minutes of careful looking, they discovered a tiny window on the other side of the structure. It was somewhat damaged, slim, yet large enough for both of them to get through. Henry glanced at Madison, who nodded in silent agreement. They climbed through the opening with caution, making their way into the warehouse. They dropped into a tiny, moist space. The odor was potent, and the dim atmosphere seemed stifling. Henry swiftly activated his flashlight, lighting up the area surrounding him. "We need to hurry," he murmured, his tone soft yet resolute. They found themselves in perilous territory, yet their curiosity and sense of obligation propelled them forward. "We're unsure how much time is left before he returns," Henry whispered as the pair hurriedly navigated the room. The space was a long, unused storage room filled with corroded shelves, piled with outdated tools and leftover pieces of discarded machinery. A light coating of dust appeared to cloak everything, and a stale odor hung in the air, rendering it nearly unbearable. "We have to discover something that reveals who this man is and why he is here," Madison stated, starting to explore the area with resolve. While they looked around, Madison noticed a small iron cabinet propped up in a corner of the room. There was an aspect of it that felt unusual, something that captured her interest in a mysterious manner. "Perhaps this will reveal something," she remarked, grabbing an iron bar from the ground and forcing the rusty lock open. After several shoves and resounding clicks, the cabinet swung open with a loud crash that reverberated through the room. Within, they discovered a variety of aged folders, each labeled with a name and date. Henry grabbed one of the folders and started to browse through it rapidly, his eyes growing wider as he grasped what he was reading. Madison, sitting next to him, opened a different folder, and the sight left her breathless. The folders held comprehensive reports of disappeared children, images, dates, descriptions. Everything was included. "These kids have been gone for the past few months," Madison remarked, tears starting to form in her eyes. "Nobody knew what happened to them." "This is terrible," she whispered, her voice trembling with anger and disbelief. Henry, next to her, clutched another folder firmly, his expression grave as he attempted to grasp the enormity of their findings. "This individual," he finally remarked, his tone weighty, "is entangled in something far more significant than we believed." The space seemed increasingly stifling now, as though the burden of their revelation was bearing down on the atmosphere surrounding them. Time was not on their side, and they both understood that their upcoming action would be vital. The enigma had evolved beyond just the man or the cat. It revolved around a far grimmer issue, something they could no longer overlook. The noise of footsteps resonated in the warehouse once more. The man was coming back. "We have to leave now," Madison hurriedly whispered, shutting her folders and attempting to stay composed. However, prior to their departure, an unforeseen event occurred. The cat emerged, stepping out from a shadowy corner of the room. His gaze was locked onto them, glimmering in the low light, and he emitted a gentle meow. On this occasion, the sound lacked the urgency of a warning and felt nearly reassuring, resembling a last act of direction. Henry and Madison shared glances, comprehending the animal's quiet gratitude. The moment had come to go. Feeling a fresh sense of urgency, the pair readied themselves and gradually exited the room, making their way to the closest exit. The man was still unaware of them, but they understood that each moment was valuable. Before stepping out, Madison glanced back one final time. The cat sat still, observing them with an eerie calmness. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice wavering, before she turned and went after Henry. As they at last arrived at the door and gently swung it open, the noise of scraping metal reverberated throughout the warehouse, booming like thunder in the stillness. The man who had been alerted quickly faced the sound, firearm in hand. "Run!" yelled Henry, taking Madison's hand. The two raced out of the warehouse, diving into the night's darkness as gunfire erupted behind them. The man fired his weapon, attempting to strike them while they dashed through the darkness. Their hearts raced uncontrollably, adrenaline influencing each action. Still, there was a sensation within them, an emotion that no bullet could wipe away. The worst was still ahead. "We must uncover more truths," Madison whispered, glancing at the files they had succeeded in seizing. His gaze was locked on the documents, yet his thoughts were racing with inquiries. "But where do we begin?" Henry queried, clutching the folder containing missing persons files. "These reports are only the beginning. Now we understand that a person is implicated, but who else?" They both realized that going back to the warehouse at that time would be deadly. They were exposed, defenseless, and lacking backup. They could have easily been dominated by someone who obviously understood what they were doing. Nonetheless, there was something that concerned them. The cat. The creature directed their every move that evening, as if it understood precisely where they ought to head. Henry was skeptical of coincidences, and the cat's actions appeared to support the notion that there were additional pieces to this mystery. Madison swiftly opened one of the folders and flipped through it until she paused on a page. A picture captured her interest. A girl with large eyes and a pure smile. Beneath the picture was her name, Isabella. The paper seemed weightier in her grip as she absorbed the information before her. "This girl," Madison started, her voice trembling. "She vanished 3 months back, and no one took action. They didn't even heed her parents." Her voice faded as a heaviness in her chest caused her to envision the pain of that family left, without answers, without justice. Something far more sinister lurked behind those vanishings. It wasn't solely the gunman or the warehouse. It involved a whole system that appeared indifferent to those lives. And in some way, the duty of uncovering the truth had landed on them. Henry, now more determined, started to devise a strategy. He understood they couldn't tackle this on their own, yet he also recognized that standard police likely wouldn't grasp the seriousness of their situation. "We need to think strategically," he stated, shattering the quiet. His gaze was unwavering, showing the resolve of a person aware that retreat was not an option. Madison glanced at him and nodded. They both realized that the only path ahead was to explore further into the depths of that enigma. The notion that police officers might be implicated loomed ominously. The extent of corruption could be far more significant than they thought. We asked, what would you do if the lives of innocent children were in your hands? How far would you go to ensure justice is served? We should approach the local newspaper, Henry suggested, his tone infused with fresh resolve and his eyes gleaming with purpose. They can assist us in disseminating information discreetly without raising suspicions among those involved. Madison paused, weighing the consequences of her choice. Revealing this information to the public might cause turmoil, but it was the sole method to guarantee that no one else vanished. After a brief pause, she nodded. "You're correct," she eventually said. "However, we must hurry. He realizes we possess the evidence. And now, it won't only be him pursuing us, but everyone else involved in this." Right in the midst of our unraveling mystery, remember, today's word is enigma. Drop it in the comments below to join our contest and change the world one story at a time. Without saying anything more, they began making their way toward the city. Each move felt charged with anxiety, as if peril was hiding at every turn. The encircling shadows appeared to hide fresh foes, and anxiety started to blend with an increasing resolve. They were no longer only fighting for their own survival. They were fighting for those children, for their families, and for everyone who had been devastated by this sinister scheme. After several hours of cautious walking, they eventually arrived at the city center. The street lamps create elongated shadows across the nearly empty roads, producing a disturbing juxtaposition. Occasionally, a vehicle would creep by, yet the quiet felt unusual for a Friday evening. Henry and Madison understood that each moment was crucial. "The newspaper is across the street," Henry said, indicating a structure with a plain front and shining windows. They stared at one another, knowing that the forthcoming action was vital. As they made their way across the avenue, an uneasy sensation surrounded them. Were they under observation? It could have been mere anxiety, but the shadows enveloping them appeared denser than normal, and the glances they shared on their journey seemed laden with doubt. Without delay, they sped up and went into the local newspaper office. Upon arrival, they were met by a security guard who appeared taken aback by their unanticipated presence at such a late hour. "What brings you here at this time?" the guard inquired, obviously wary. Henry, still breathless and with a sense of urgency in his tone, said, "We must speak to the editor." "It's an emergency." The guard scowled, pausing briefly, but Henry's earnest demeanor persuaded him. He nodded and allowed them to go by. They stared at the editor, a middle-aged man whose hair was thinning and whose demeanor reflected both curiosity and skepticism. "What precisely do you two possess that cannot wait until tomorrow?" he inquired, while starting to sift through the folders Madison had set on the table. "This cannot wait," Madison answered, her voice quavering as she fought to manage her feelings. "Children are vanishing, and we have solid proof that a network is involved. We discovered this proof, and we nearly lost our lives attempting to flee with it." His gaze was locked on the editor, who was starting to display real curiosity. He examined the documents thoroughly, turning each page one by one. His expression gradually shifted. Gravity supplanted doubt, and unmistakable worry emerged on his face. What lay before him was not a typical accusation. It wasn't a mere suspicion. It was something far larger, much more sinister, and considerably more perilous. He was aware that releasing this information involved substantial risk, but it could also uncover unsettling truths that needed to be seen by the public. What would you do if the lives of innocent children were in your hands? How far would you go to ensure justice is served? We must uncover more truths. Embrace the unknown and share this video with at least 3 friends who thrive on suspenseful stories. Because together, we're stronger and every shared secret holds power. For each comment on this video, Madison softly declared, inspired by the power of community, we promise to donate to organizations committed to uncovering the truth and helping children in need. Let's make an impact together. Your engagement fuels our mission, said Henry at the closing. Subscribing is quick, easy, and free, but it means the world to us and the stories yet to be told. And so, as they embark on their race against time, armed with the truth, we hold our breath, waiting for what unfolds next. Remember, the stories that change our world are just waiting to be told. Stay curious and stay with us.